The hotel spat her out into the night, like it was relieved to be rid of her. Ava Morales pushed through the heavy employee door and stepped into the service corridor. The buzz of fluorescent lights drilling into her skull. Her feet throbbed inside cheap black shoes that had lost their support months ago. 14 hours of coffee refills. Fake smiles. And, can you split the check 6 ways had left her muscles trembling with each step. Her stomach cramped. A hollow, angry twist. She tried to remember the last real meal she'd had. Not cold fries stolen from a plate in the kitchen. Not a crust of bread from the staff room. An actual meal. Something hot. Something that didn't feel like begging. She couldn't remember. She pushed through the exit door. And the night hit her like a slap. The concrete parking structure loomed above her. A grey skeleton under the October sky. Wind knifed through her thin jacket. Sliding under the fabric and settling in her bones. She shivered and hugged herself with arms that felt too heavy. The elevator up to the street had a handwritten sign, taped to it, out of order. Someone had drawn a sad face next to the words. Ava stared at it for a moment, then let out a soft, humorless breath. Of course, she muttered. Her options were simple: climb the echoing concrete ramps, or cut through the lower level of the parking structure to the stairwell at the far end. The shortcut saved 5 minutes. At this hour, 5 minutes meant 15 extra minutes of sleep before her daughter woke up. She chose the shortcut. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally loud as she stepped into the dim garage. The air smelled faintly of oil, exhaust, and the metallic tang of cold concrete. The overhead lights buzzed and flickered in places, leaving pockets of shadow between the rows of cars. Most of the spaces were empty. Only a handful of vehicles scattered like abandoned thoughts. Ava wrapped her arms tighter around herself and kept her eyes forward. She hated parking garages at night. They felt like places bad things happened and no one bothered to notice until morning. She tried to think of Lily instead. Lily. 3 years old and growing out of her shoes again. Lily. Who needed new pajamas because her old ones were getting too short in the legs. Lily. Whose daycare bill was due in 3 days. And the last time Ava had opened the envelope, her vision had blurred with panic. The mental list of things she owed money for was longer than she could hold in her head at once: rent, daycare, electricity, the past due notice from the hospital when Lily had the flu last winter, the credit card Nathan had opened in her name and then walked away from. Nathan. His name alone was enough to tighten her chest. Nathan Carter. With his easy smile and prettier lies. The man who'd called her baby while draining their savings account down to nothing. The man who'd kissed her belly and promised he'd be there for every ultrasound. Then vanished the week she bought the crib. He'd taken more than money when he walked out. He'd taken any version of Ava that believed in safety. Her foot caught on a crack in the concrete. And she stumbled. Catching herself on a nearby pillar, the jolt sent a hot spear of pain up her ankle. Great. She whispered. Just great. She straightened, ready to push forward, when something glossy and sleek caught her eye. On the next row over, under a functioning overhead light, sat a car that absolutely did not belong in this neighborhood. Every line of it was predatory and smooth. The body, a deep midnight blue that almost drank in the light instead of reflecting it. A Maserati. Low and powerful and coiled like an animal at rest. It was parked crooked in a reserved space marked with a spray-painted warning about towing. Whoever owned it clearly didn't care about warnings. Ava slowed without meaning to. Cars like that didn't exist in her world. In her world. Engines coughed instead of purred, and check engine lights stayed on for months because there was no money to turn them off. She shouldn't get closer. She knew that. But her body drifted 2 steps forward anyway. The driver's side window was up. The passenger side was cracked just an inch. Not enough for a hand to fit through, but enough for the faintest trace of cologne to drift out clean. Expensive. Threaded with something darker underneath. Then she saw it. In the cup holder between the front seats. Resting like it had grown there. Was a watch. Even from a few feet away. She could tell it wasn't just some cheap knockoff. The metal gleamed more white than yellow. Catching each thin ribbon of fluorescent light and turning it into a sharp glint. The face was dark, framed by a ring of what looked like tiny, perfect stones. The band was smooth and heavy-looking. Money, she thought numbly. That's what it looks like. Someone melted money and turned it into a watch. Her first instinct was to keep walking. She wasn't stupid. This wasn't her business. Rich people left their expensive toys everywhere because they could replace them without blinking. People like her didn't even let their phones out of their pockets. But then her stomach cramped again. Harder this time. She thought of the grocery store circular folded in her bag. The way she'd circled sale prices, and still couldn't make the total add up. She thought of Lily asking, "Mummy, can we have the cereal with the tiger this time?" And the way Ava had smiled and said, "Next month, baby." Even though she knew next month wouldn't be any different. Next month never was. Her feet carried her closer to the car. She told herself it was just curiosity. Just a look. Just something to tell her co-workers about tomorrow night, when they were trading stories to stay awake. Up close. The car was even more unreal. The leather seats looked softer than the bed she went home to. The dashboard glowed faintly, with sleeping lights and silent systems. The watch sat right there. No box. No lock. No attempt to hide it at all. She could almost feel the weight of it in her palm already. Rent. Her mind whispered. Daycare. Groceries that don't come from the discount bin. Shoes without holes. A jacket that doesn't let the wind walk right through you. The watch could be all of that and more. Pawn it. Sell it. Never look back. It was wrong. Criminal. Stupid. No one would miss it. Another voice argued. Not really. Whoever owned this car had more than enough. People like that never noticed when something small went missing. And then, because exhaustion and hunger and fear all worked together to blur the lines of right and wrong, Ava found herself glancing around the empty garage. No one. No cameras she could see. No echo of footsteps except her own. Her heart hammered so loud she could feel it in her throat as she reached toward the narrow gap in the passenger window. Her fingers brushed the cool glass, then slipped through the open space with careful, trembling precision. The watch was colder than she expected when she curled her fingers around it. Heavier, too. It didn't feel like jewelry. It felt like a consequence. For a heartbeat. She just held it, stunned by its weight, in her hand. In that moment. Was more money than she would see in a year. Maybe in several. She could do it. She could slide it into her pocket. Walk out of this garage. And tomorrow, her life would be different. It would be wrong. It would be survival. She was still arguing with herself when a voice poured into the silence behind her. Thinking about taking something that isn't yours. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They were low and smooth. Carrying easily across the concrete. Ava froze. Every muscle locking tight. The watch suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her hand. Her breath lodged somewhere between her lungs and her mouth. Slowly. As if any sudden movement might make everything worse. She turned. He stood a few feet away, partially in shadow. Like the darkness had stepped away from the wall and grown a body, tall, easily over 6 feet. With the kind of broad shoulders that made a tailored wool coat fall in perfect lines. Dark hair swept back from a strong, sharp face, clean-shaven jaw, high cheekbones. and a mouth that looked like it never smiled unless there was a reason. But it was his eyes that held her. They were a pale, icy grey, so light they almost didn't look real in the dim garage. Unblinking, unreadable, fixed on her, with a focus that made her feel like she'd been pinned to the spot. Her lips moved before her brain caught up. I wasn't. The lie died halfway out of her mouth. There was no point. The watch glinted accusingly in her open palm. He stepped closer. Not hurried. Not threatening. Just moving with the easy confidence of someone who had never once worried about their place in the world. Even at this distance. She could smell the cologne she'd noticed before, crisp and clean over something darker. Like smoke that had learned to behave itself. I have security cameras in this garage, he said. His voice almost conversational. They don't lie. Neither do hands inside my car. She swallowed. Her throat felt like sandpaper. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'll put it back. I swear. I don't drop it, he said. It costs more than your annual salary. The words hit her like a slap. Because they were probably true. She flinched. And something flickered in his eyes. Not pity. He didn't look like a man who did pity, more like interest. Sharpened. He studied her face in a way that made her skin prickle. His gaze drifting over the tired, bruise-like shadows beneath her eyes. The frayed cuff of her jacket. The faint grease stain on her shirt, from a dropped plate, hours ago. Ava Morales, he said finally. Like he was confirming a file, rather than asking a question. Night shift waitress. Lives in a walk-up 3 blocks from here. 1 daughter. 3 years old. She went cold all over. How do you know my name? The words came out strangled. One corner of his mouth curved. But it wasn't a smile. I make it my business to know who walks around my properties after midnight, he replied. Especially when they reach into my car. Her fingers shook around the watch. She wanted to drop it. But fear and some twisted sense of politeness kept her from letting it clatter to the floor. He took another step. And now there was barely a car's length between them. A single mother who hasn't eaten, he said quietly. His gaze dropping briefly to the way she pressed a hand against her hollow stomach. Who has worked 14 hours straight and still walks through this garage like she owes life something. Those pale eyes lifted back to hers. You don't scare me. Ava Morales, he murmured. You interest me. She couldn't speak. Interest wasn't better than anger. Interest could be worse, as if in answer to her unspoken thought. The hair on the back of her neck rose. Not from him, from behind him. Movement. At the far end of the garage. 2 shapes slipping through the doorway. Their faces indistinct under pulled-up hoods. They didn't walk like people looking for their car. They moved with purpose. Slow and deliberate. Eyes locked on her, and the man between them. Ava's heartbeat stuttered. For one wild second, she thought they must belong to him. Bodyguards. Maybe, but then she saw the way their hands hovered near their jackets. Not for keys, but for something heavier. The man in front of her saw it. Too. He shifted. Almost imperceptibly. But the effect was immediate. One moment. He was a stranger, confronting a would-be thief. The next. He was something else. Something coiled and lethal. Without a word. He stepped in front of her. His body blocking her completely from the intruder's line of sight. The gesture was so automatic it stunned her. You came alone. One of the figures called. Voice muffled by the distance. Not very smart. Depends on your definition of smart. The man in front of her replied. His tone suddenly cooler. You're trespassing. Just picking up what doesn't belong to you. The other said. You're not the only one who owns this city. Moretti. Moretti. The name dropped into Ava's mind like a stone into deep water, sending ripples of dread out in every direction. She'd heard it before on the news. Whispered in the kitchen at work. Muttered over broken glass in the alley behind the bar next door. Dominic Moretti. Billionaire. CEO. And, if rumors were to be believed, the man who pulled half the city's strings from behind glass walls and expensive suits. She had just tried to steal from him. Ava's knees went weak. She barely registered the brief, sharp whistle he gave, or the way 3 shadows seemed to detach themselves from the darkness near the pillars. Men in dark coats. Moving quickly. Efficiently. Spreading out with casual, practiced menace. The 2 intruders slowed, assessing their odds. The silence stretched. Electric and dangerous. "This is our only warning," one of them said finally. "Your time is running out." Then they backed away, disappearing the way they came, swallowed by the concrete throat of the exit. Ava exhaled shakily. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. The man in front of her, Dominic Moretti, stood still for a heartbeat longer. Then, slowly, he turned back to her, the lethal edge receding from his posture, but not quite leaving his eyes. "Give me the watch," he said. She thrust it toward him with both hands. Ashamed and terrified, in equal measure, he took it without looking at it, his gaze never leaving her face. "Someone is watching you," he said softly. "And it isn't me." The words slipped under her skin and settled like ice. Someone, plural. Not a stranger, in a garage. Not a man she'd never met until tonight. A memory flashed in her mind, a black car idling half a block from her apartment last week. The same car she'd dismissed as coincidence. The feeling of eyes on her as she rushed Lily up the stairs and fumbled the keys. She thought of Nathan. Of the debt collectors with 2 friendly smiles. Of the way he'd said, before he left, "If things go bad, you won't be hard to find." For the first time, it occurred to her that he might not have meant it as a threat to her. Maybe he'd meant it as a promise to someone else. Ava swallowed hard, staring up at the man who had just shielded her with his body and called her by name. Her life, she realized, had just changed. Not tomorrow, not someday. If she sold the right thing, or worked enough overtime. Tonight, in a cold parking garage, with a stolen watch and a man whose name made hardened criminals hesitate. And somewhere in the middle of that realization, a far more terrifying one unfolded. If Nathan had dragged her into something dark enough to attract Dominic Moretti's attention, then her daughter might already be in danger. Dominic's car slid through the city, like it was part of the night itself. Ava sat in the back seat, pressed against the cool leather, fingers knotted so tightly her knuckles looked bloodless. The city lights smeared past the tinted windows neon. Street lamps. The dull glow of late-night diners. None of it felt real. Her world had shrunk to the echo of that name in her head, ringing like a warning bell. Moretti. Across from her, Dominic sat angled slightly toward the window, one hand loose on his knee, the other resting on the armrest. He hadn't spoken since they left the garage. He didn't have to. His silence was its own kind of pressure, heavy and controlled. She could still feel where he'd stepped in front of her, where his body had blocked the sight of the men at the far end of the garage. No one had done that for her in a long time. Maybe ever. The car eased to a stop underground somewhere, the engine going quiet with a soft, expensive sigh. A door opened. One of his men murmured something about all clear. The world rearranged itself around her again. "Come on," Dominic said quietly. He didn't offer his hand. He didn't have to. She followed him because there was nowhere else to go. The elevator that took them up to his penthouse was lined with mirrored walls and soft lighting. Ava caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection, messy hair, tired eyes, waitress uniform smudged with the day's labor, and felt like a stain in an otherwise perfect picture. Dominic stood beside her, his reflection tall and sharp, in a dark overcoat. His gaze focused straight ahead. The contrast between them was almost painful. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into another world. The penthouse looked like a magazine spread brought to life. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around two sides of the space, offering a sweeping view of the city, glittering against the black sky. The floors were pale wood, so clean, they almost glowed. The furniture was all clean lines and neutral tones, arranged with mathematical precision. It was beautiful. It was cold. No photos. No toys. No clutter. No sign that anyone actually lived here, just evidence that someone owned it. Ava suddenly became hyper-aware of her worn-out shoes squeaking faintly against the polished floor. "Sit," Dominic said, nodding toward a long, low couch, the color of cream. "You're shaking." She hadn't noticed until he mentioned it. Now she realized her whole body trembled. Small and relentless. The way it did after too much caffeine and not enough sleep. She perched on the edge of the couch, afraid of leaving a mark. Her bag slid to the floor at her feet. "Forgotten." Dominic shrugged off his coat and laid it over the back of a chair with casual grace, even stripped down to his dress shirt and dark slacks. He looked like a man who always knew exactly what room he was in, and how much of it he commanded. He moved to a sleek bar against the wall and poured a measure of amber liquid into a heavy glass. For himself, she assumed, until he crossed the room and held it out to her. She shook her head. "I don't. You're in shock," he said. "Take a sip. It will help." She reached for the glass with hands that technically belonged to her but felt very far away. The first sip burned like fire down her throat, but it anchored her, dragging her out of the swirling panic in her chest, back into her body. "Tell me about your daughter," Dominic said. The question caught her off guard. She looked up, finding those pale eyes already on her. He wasn't making small talk. He was studying her response like it mattered. "Her name is Lily," she said slowly. Saying it out loud made her chest ache. "She's 3. She likes dinosaurs and peanut butter sandwiches and falling asleep in the middle of the floor for no reason." Her voice cracked on the last word. The wave she'd been holding back all night finally crested. All the fear and exhaustion and white-knuckle surviving broke loose. "I can't lose her," Ava whispered. "She's all I have. If something happens to her because of me, it won't," Dominic said. He didn't move closer, but somehow the space between them felt smaller. He leaned his forearms on his knees, his posture relaxed but intent, like every part of him was tuned to her and nothing else. "She's already in this," Ava said. "Whoever those men were, they were looking at me like I was inventory." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "They weren't mine," he said. "They were sent by people who think they can take what belongs to me." The way he said it made goosebumps lift on her arms. "Why?" she asked. "Why me? I'm nobody. I wait tables and hope my tips cover the light bill. I don't know anything that matters to people like you or them." Dominic was quiet for a moment, then sat back slightly, as if deciding something. "Nathan Carter worked for me," he said. "Until he didn't." Her heart stuttered. "That's not possible," she said automatically. The response, as reflexive as a knee-jerk. "He worked for a consulting firm. He wore cheap suits and complained about spreadsheets. Consultants are useful," Dominic replied. "Especially the ones who don't ask the right questions about where the money goes." His eyes didn't leave hers as he continued. "Last year, Nathan oversaw several accounts tied to my legitimate holdings. On paper, everything looked correct. Profits, losses, transfers. But numbers talk. And these numbers were lying. A hint of cold satisfaction edged his voice. I pay people to listen when numbers lie. Ava's pulse pounded in her ears. How much? She asked. Even though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. 900,000. Dominic said. Give or take a few hundred. The room tilted for a moment. She thought of eviction notices. Shut-off warnings. Counting coins in her palm. Art racing. $900,000 had vanished into Nathan's pockets, while she'd struggled to decide whether to buy her daughter medicine or groceries. Her breath left her in a shaky exhale. I didn't know. She whispered. I swear. I didn't. I know you didn't. Dominic cut in quietly. If you had, you would have left him before he had the chance to leave you. It was a simple statement. But it landed with a weight she didn't expect. It implied something dangerous, that he had looked into her life deeply enough to decide what she would or wouldn't do. Where is he now? She asked. A voice small. Somewhere between here and Eastern Europe. Dominic said. He's been trading my money and information to a family that thinks they can stake a claim in my city. They don't have roots here. They don't have history. So they want leverage. He let those last two words hang between them. A single mother. Ava said slowly. And a child. Understanding sank into her like lead. Her hand tightened around the glass without thinking. The liquid inside trembled. They don't need your money, Dominic said. They need something that hurts the man who stole from me. Something they can dangle in front of him. Or in front of me. Her vision blurred. So this is my fault, she said hoarsely. I picked the wrong man. And now my daughter, this is Nathan's fault, Dominic said. And there was no give in his tone. He made the choice to steal from me. He made the choice to cut you loose. He made the choice to run to people even worse than I am. He was so calm when he said it. Not bragging. Not apologizing. Just stating fact. Ava's shoulders hunched. I can't protect her, she said. I can't even keep the heat on without wondering which bill I won't pay that month. I work until I can't see straight, and it's still not enough. And now I brought her into a world where monsters know her name. Her voice cracked on the last word. She pressed the heel of her hand hard against her mouth, as if she could physically shove the sobs back down. For a long breath, Dominic didn't move. Then, slowly, he shifted closer on the couch. Not close enough to touch her. Not crowding. But close enough that he was no longer just a figure at a distance. Close enough that she could see the faint shadows under his eyes. The silver thread at his temple she hadn't noticed before. You've carried too much alone, he said quietly. Let me carry some of it. Tears spilt over, despite everything she did to stop them. No one had said that to her. Not her family. Not her co-workers. Certainly not Nathan. The idea that anyone might be willing to shoulder even a fraction of the weight felt like a foreign language. Why? She whispered. Because I don't like loose ends, he said. Because I don't let other people play games on my board with pieces I didn't give them. And softer. So soft she almost missed it. Because your daughter didn't choose any of this. Her hands were shaking so badly now that the glass in her grip rattled. Dominic's gaze dropped to it. He reached out. Slow and deliberate. Until his fingers brushed hers. Careful, he murmured. You'll break it. He didn't just take it from her. He wrapped his hand around her wrist first. Steadying it. His skin warm against hers. The contact sent a sharp, unwelcome awareness spiraling up her arm. She swallowed hard. Unable to look away from the way his thumb pressed lightly against the racing pulse at the base of her hand. His eyes lifted to meet hers. For a tiny, suspended moment. The air between them changed. Something electric and unspoken hummed there, terror and gratitude and something that had no name yet. Something she didn't dare acknowledge. Then he eased the glass out of her grip and set it on the low table. His hand didn't fall away immediately. He seemed to notice at the same time she did. There was a flicker in his expression, like he'd surprised himself. Then he released her and leaned back, the distance reasserting itself. His phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up, glanced at the screen, and his expression went from cool to carved out of stone. He rotated the phone and slid it toward her. A text message glared up from the screen, illuminated in the dim light. Unknown number. We need to talk. Come alone. Her chest constricted. It's him, she said. She didn't have to see the number to know. That mix of arrogance and command fit Nathan perfectly. Dominic watched her closely. What did I tell you? He said quietly. He doesn't want to make amends. He wants to use you. He used me before, she said, bitterness roughening her voice. Why stop now? He's talking to them. Dominic went on. The men you saw tonight, they weren't just passing through. They're here to test boundaries. He's offering them you and your daughter in exchange for protection and whatever he thinks he deserves. The floor seemed to fall away under her. He wouldn't, she said. But there was no conviction behind it, not after everything she'd already learned. Dominic's look was flat. He would. He already has. Her vision swam. Tears burned again. Hot and humiliating. She hated that Nathan still had the power to do this to her. To twist her insides, just by existing. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't play spy for you. Or walk into some trap. Or Ava. His voice was sharper now, cutting through her spiraling panic. She looked up. His eyes had gone even paler, like a storm pulling back to its center. He reached out and took her chin gently but firmly between his fingers, angling her face up toward his. The touch was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with control and, oddly, comfort. No one touches what's under my protection, he said. The words sank into her like a pledge and a threat at once, before she could answer, before she could decide whether that sentence reassured or terrified her. His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Nathan, Dominic answered, without looking at the screen. Yeah. There was a pause. His jaw tightened. When he asked, another pause, where the muscles in his shoulders bunched under his shirt. The only outward sign of tension. Keep eyes on the building, he said. Don't engage unless you have to. I'm sending backup. He ended the call and stood. What happened, Ava? Forced out. They're already watching your place, he said. My men spotted 2 vehicles that don't belong on your street. And someone tried your front door an hour ago. Her heart stopped, then lurched back into motion. Lily, she breathed. Mrs. Ortiz has her. She watches her overnight when I have the late shift. But she has to leave for work at 6. And sit, he said, already moving toward the door. I'm sending more men. They'll get your daughter and bring her here. I'm going, Ava said, scrambling to her feet. I can't just sit here while strangers. You're not walking into a building that may already have armed men inside, he said, turning back to her. There was an edge in his voice now. Something deadly serious. If they see you, they'll grab you. They won't care that you're her mother. You'll just be another bargaining chip. If something happens to her, it won't, he said again. Not if you listen to me. He stepped closer. So close she had to tilt her head back to look at him. The city lights through the windows painted pale lines across his face, emphasizing the hard set of his mouth. You asked why you should trust me, he said. You shouldn't. I'm not a good man. Ava. But I keep my word. And I am telling you, no one is touching that child tonight. Her breath hitched. Every instinct screamed at her to run down the stairs herself, to tear through the streets until she reached her daughter. But those same instincts knew she'd be walking into the dark blind. Without allies. Without a plan. Dominic had both. He took out his phone again, firing off another call. His tone shifted when he spoke. Brisk and commanding. I want 2 more cars there 5 minutes ago, he said. If they're at the door, you move. I don't care who else is in the hallway. Get the girl. Use the back stairwell, not the front. And make sure Ortiz doesn't do anything heroic. I need witnesses alive. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. All we can do now is wait, he said. Waiting turned out to be its own kind of torture. Ava paced the length of the big windows, barely noticing the glittering city spread out below like a map of someone else's life. Dominic watched her for a while from the shadows near the bar, then gave up, pretending he was doing anything else. Sit before you fall, he said, at one point. But his voice had lost its earlier sharpness. It was quieter now. Almost gentle. She didn't sit. Every minute felt like an hour. Every passing siren out in the city sounded like it was headed for her block. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. When the call finally came, Dominic answered before the first ring had fully finished. Talk. Silence stretched, broken only by a few murmured words from the other end. Then the tension in his shoulders loosened by a fraction. Bring them up, he said. Use the private elevator. He hung up and looked at Ava. They have her, he said simply. Her knees nearly gave out with relief. She's fine. Scared. Crying. But not hurt. His eyes softened. Just a little. My men got there as they were trying the back door to your building. They scared them off. A breath she didn't know she'd been holding shuddered out of her. The world blurred with sudden, hot tears. Thank you, she whispered. He shook his head, as if the words didn't belong to him, then nodded toward the hallway leading to the private elevator. Go, he said. She'll be here any minute. A few minutes later, the elevator doors slid open, and a big man in a dark jacket stepped out, cradling a small, sobbing bundle in his arms. Lily's wild curls were a tangle of sleep and fear, her tiny hands clutching at the man's shirt. When she saw Ava, she reached out with a broken little cry. Mama Ava ran forward, scooping her daughter into her arms. Lily wrapped herself around her neck like she was trying to fuse their bodies back into one. Ava murmured nonsense into her hair, the smell of baby shampoo, and tears undoing her from the inside out. It's okay. Baby. I've got you. I've got you. Only when Lily's ragged breathing began to slow did Ava realize Dominic had moved closer. He stood a few feet away now. His posture relaxed, but his eyes fixed entirely on the little girl in her arms. Lily turned her tear-streaked face toward him, hiccuping, her small body still shivering. The man who made hardened criminals think twice did something she never would have imagined. He softened. The angle of his shoulders, the line of his mouth, even his eyes, everything eased. He stepped forward slowly, like he was approaching a skittish animal. You're safe now, little one, he said, his voice low and steady. I promise. Lily stared at him for a long moment, her lower lip quivering. Then, with the simple trust of a child who didn't understand what monsters look like, she reached one hand out toward him. Dominic looked briefly startled. Then he carefully extended his own hand, engulfing her tiny fingers in his. His thumb brushed lightly over the back of her hand, in a motion that could almost have been called tender. Ava watched his face. This, she realized, was a side of him not everyone got to see. The man who ordered armed men around the city had gone almost quiet in front of a 3-year-old, with tear tracks on her cheeks. Something unfamiliar unfurled in Ava's chest. Gratitude. Yes. Relief. Absolutely. But threaded through it, dangerous and persistent, was something else. For the first time in years, she wasn't the only one standing between her daughter and the dark. Millennium Park looked almost innocent in the late afternoon light. Families moved between the fountains and sculptures, kids shrieking and chasing each other, tourists lifting phones toward the sky, joggers weaving through clusters of people, with headphones in and eyes distant. The air smelled like roasted nuts and coffee, and something sweet from a food cart nearby. It could have been any other day in the city. Ava stood near the edge of the reflecting pool, hands buried deep in the pockets of her coat, watching her warped reflection blur and settle in the water. She could feel the tiny wire taped carefully against her skin, a foreign presence beneath her clothes. It scratched faintly every time she swallowed. She knew Dominic's people were here, though she couldn't see them. That was the point. They blended into the background, someone reading a newspaper on a bench, a couple arguing quietly, a man pretending to take photos of the skyline instead of scanning the crowd. Dominic himself had stayed out of sight. He'd walked her to the service entrance of the park, fingers brushing her elbow as he adjusted the collar of her coat, like it mattered. "You don't speak first," he told her. "You let him talk. Let him show you who he really is." "And if he tries to take me?" she'd asked. His eyes had gone flat. Pale glass, over deep water. He won't get far. Now. Alone. Her courage felt thinner than paper. She checked her phone again even though she didn't need to. The message had been burned into her memory from the moment it appeared. "We need to talk. Come alone. 4:00 p.m. Millennium Park." By the water. She typed back a single word, okay, hands trembling, while Dominic watched with an unreadable expression. "You're ready?" he'd asked. "No," she'd said. "But do it anyway. Now." As the big digital clock on the nearby building ticked over to 4, she heard her name spoken in a voice that once felt like safety. "Ava." She turned. Nathan Carter approached, with the casual swagger of a man who thought the world owed him more than it had given. The last time she'd seen him, he'd been softer, less defined jaw, cheaper suit, tired eyes from long hours in an office. This Nathan was carved sharper. His suit fit better. His hair was styled like someone else paid for it. His skin held the kind of tan you didn't get in Chicago in October. He smiled. That same easy curve of lips that used to make her stomach flip. "You look different," he said, letting his gaze travel over her. Tired, but still beautiful. She felt nothing, or maybe she felt too much. It all cancelled out into a heavy numbness. "You look expensive," she said. His laugh was short. Amused. That's one way to put it. He stepped closer, hands in his pockets, as if they were just two old lovers meeting by chance. "You got my message," he said. "I wasn't sure you would. You didn't leave a lot of room to say no," she replied. He tilted his head, studying her. "You sound angry." "Do I?" she asked. "I wonder why that is." His smile tightened. "I didn't come here to fight. Ava, I came to offer you something." Her stomach twisted. "You already offered me something. Remember, a life, a family. Then you took it back." He shrugged, as if they were discussing a bad investment instead of the life they'd made together. "Things change," he said. "You know how it is. People want different things. You wanted $900,000 and a plane ticket," she said. "Let's not pretend you left for spiritual growth, For the briefest moment. Something like annoyance flashed across his face. Then his expression smoothed out again. I left because staying would have been a death sentence. He said. You have no idea what kind of man you were living with. She barked out a laugh. That's the first honest thing you said. I really didn't. He moved closer. Close enough that she could see tiny lines at the corners of his eyes she didn't remember. He smelled like expensive cologne and someone else's life. You're in over your head. Ava. He said. Voice dropping. I've been watching. I know who you've been spending time with. The words slid over her skin like cold water. You mean Dominic? She said. Saying his name out loud felt like invoking something dangerous and solid. Moretti. Nathan corrected. You think running to him was smart? He's the reason Lily is still alive. She said quietly. So, yeah. I kind of do. Nathan's jaw tightened again. He took a breath. Forced a smile back onto his face. Look. He said. What's done is done. I can't change the past. But I can fix the future for you. And for Lily. He slipped a hand from his pocket and gestured vaguely toward the city. I'm connected now. He said. Really connected. These people, they can give us a way out. New identities. New city. More money than you've ever dreamed of. No more double shifts. No more scrounging for tips. Lily, in good schools. Safety. The way he said us made her stomach churn. Us. She repeated. We're us again now. He gave that half shrug she remembered too well. We have a kid together. That doesn't go away. You walked away. She reminded him. You knew I was pregnant. You knew I had no job. No savings. And you still took what we had and disappeared. It was complicated. He said. It was selfish. She snapped. His eyes cooled. The charming mask slipped a fraction. You always did make everything about you. He said softly. You think I wanted to leave. You think I wanted to be looking over my shoulder every day. You could have looked over your shoulder in our apartment. She said. At least then Lily would have had a father. He snorted. Here we go. The guilt trip. Her chest burned. You never loved me. She said. The realization landing with a dull, inevitable thud. He hesitated for just a second too long. What we had was convenient. He said finally. Warm bed? Good company. Someone to make me feel like less of a piece of shit when I came home at night. I liked you. Ava. But love. He shook his head. Love doesn't pay the kind of bills I had. The words sliced clean and deep. You're unbelievable. She whispered. What I am is realistic. He said. We live in a world where men like Moretti run things. You think he's going to let you walk away when he's done playing hero. He's not saving you. Ava. He's staking a claim. What are you doing then? She asked. Selling me to the next highest bidder, he smiled. And this time there was nothing pleasant in it. I'm making sure I come out of this alive. He said. And if that means handing over a woman who hates my guts, and a kid I never asked for, he shrugged. Why should that be my problem? All the air left her lungs at once. He planned to sell us. She said numbly. You plan to sell us. He rolled his eyes. Stop being dramatic. They're not slavers. They're businessmen. They take what they can use. They wanted Lily. She said. The name catching on a sob. You were going to let them take your daughter. He stepped closer suddenly. Posture tightening. Don't pretend you kept her for me. He hissed. You kept her because you wanted to play family without asking what that actually costs. He looked her up and down. Gaze sweeping over the cheap coat. The scuffed boots. The tired face. Look at you. He said. Clocking in. Clocking out. Begging for overtime. You think this is noble? standing in the cold, outside a park, while rich people walk past. Hoping someone will finally give you a break, he laughed. Sharp and ugly. You ruined my life, he said. You and that kid. You anchored me to the wrong side of town. You made it impossible for me to get out clean. I was supposed to be in a corner office by now, not running numbers for men with guns. Something inside her cracked. For a moment, all she could see was Lily's face. Cheeks round with baby fat. Eyes too big for her little head. Lily, who woke up every morning asking if today was a mummy stays home day, even though the answer was almost always no. Lily, who had nothing to do with any of this, who had never asked to be born into a life where her father measured her worth against the weight of his own comfort. Lily deserved better than a father like you, Ava said. The words came out steady, calm. They surprised her with their lack of tremor. Nathan blinked. What did you just say? You heard me, she said. She deserved better. I did. Too. But I can live with you treating me like trash. I can't live with you treating her like a bargaining chip. His face hardened. You think Moretti's any better? He demanded. You think he's not doing the exact same thing right now, using you to get to me? Maybe he is, she said. But he didn't abandon me when I needed him. He didn't choose money over his own child. His eyes flashed. In one smooth, ugly motion, he closed the distance between them and grabbed her arm, fingers biting into the meat of her bicep. The suddenness of it shocked a gasp out of her. The traffic noise and chatter of the park seemed to fade, replaced by the roar of blood in her ears. You don't get to talk to me like that, he hissed. Leaning in so close, she could see the pulse pounding in his temple. You wouldn't have Lily if it wasn't for me. Let go, she said, trying to yank her arm free. His grip tightened. You're going to come with me, he said. You're going to tell your new friends you made a mistake. You're going to explain to our new partners that you belong to me. The word hit her wrong. Belong. Like she was something you could hand over with a receipt. Before she could draw breath to scream. Before she could decide whether she actually would. His hand lifted from her arm as if someone had peeled it off. Dominic had always moved with a kind of quiet, coiled energy. But now it was something else entirely. 1 second Nathan's fingers were digging into her skin. And the next, they were hanging in midair. Twisted away from her. Dominic stood between them. His posture deceptively relaxed. His hand wrapped around Nathan's wrist with casual precision. Touch her again, he said. His voice low and almost serene. And I will end you. Nathan's face went paper white. Jesus. He breathed. You actually came. Of course I came. Dominic said. You invited yourself to my war. It would have been rude not to show up. Around them. The park kept moving. Kids laughed. A door barked. Somewhere. Someone's phone rang with a cheerful song. No one seemed to notice the silent circle that had tightened around the three of them men in plain clothes, holding still, a little too deliberately. Eyes a little too focused. Nathan tried to jerk his arm back. But Dominic's grip didn't budge. If anything, it tightened. You think they're going to protect you, Nathan spat. You think this is over just because you showed up with your little army. Dominic watched him as if he were a bug pinned under glass. You had a choice, he said. You could have disappeared quietly with the money. It would have been an irritation, an inconvenience. Instead, you brought strangers into my city. You used my name in rooms you weren't invited into. And you pointed them toward a woman and a child who had done nothing to you. Nathan's gaze darted around, searching for an opening that wasn't there. I did what I had to do, he said. You would have killed me. Dominic shrugged one shoulder. You stole from me. You knew the rules. His eyes flicked briefly toward Ava. still frozen where he'd left her. Something unreadable passed over his features. When he looked back at Nathan, his expression was made of stone. "My problem," he said, "isn't that you ran? It's that you tried to make them run with you." He released Nathan's wrist with a flick of his hand. Nathan stumbled back, rubbing at the reddening skin, eyes flicking nervously to the men, starting to move in, with slow, unhurried confidence. "You can't do this," he said. In public, Dominic's mouth curved. Not quite a smile. "Who do you think owns the cameras?" he asked. The men closed in. There was no shouting. No dramatic takedown, just a few quiet words. A couple of subtle gestures. And suddenly, Nathan was boxed in. His options narrowed down to zero. Panic finally broke through his arrogance. "Ava," he said sharply, turning toward her. Tell them I'm still her father. Tell them you don't want this." She met his eyes and felt nothing. Whatever grip he'd once had on her had snapped cleanly somewhere between the parking garage and this moment. "You were never really her father," she said. "You were just there when she was made." His face twisted. For a second, she thought he might say something else, something crueler, something that would lodge in her bones, forever. Instead, he swallowed whatever it was, and let Dominic's men guide him away. The moment he was out of reach, the adrenaline that had been holding her upright drained out of her legs. Ava's body began to shake, small tremors rippling from the inside out. Her breath hitched, chest tight and aching. Dominic turned back to her the instant Nathan was clear. The lethal aura he'd worn like a second skin slid away in increments, like a coat being shrugged off. "Hey," he said quietly. Just that. "Hey." A normal word in a not at all normal day. Her knees buckled. He was there before she hit the ground, arms wrapping around her with a certainty that made something inside her loosen. He pulled her against his chest, one hand cupping the back of her head, the other firm around her waist. He smelled like expensive cologne and wool, and something uniquely his clean. Cold, controlled. His heartbeat thudded steady under her ear. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you." The words cracked something open. Hot tears spilled over, soaking into his shirt. She clutched at the fabric, fingers digging into his side as if he were the only solid thing left in a world made of water. For once, she didn't try to swallow the sobs. She let them come, every single fear she'd buried, every humiliation, every night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she'd make it through one more month. Every time she told Lily everything would be okay, when she didn't know if that was true. All of it poured out, in great, gasping waves. Dominic didn't flinch. He didn't shush her, or tell her to calm down. He just held her. Big hands steady and unmovable. As if he'd been built for this exact purpose, and nothing else. By the time the worst of it passed, the light had shifted, shadows lengthening across the park. Her head felt stuffed with cotton. Her eyes burned. But she was breathing again. Even if it was uneven, Dominic eased back just enough to look at her, his hands still on her shoulders. "You did well," he said. She gave a broken laugh. "I cried on your suit. That's what dry cleaning is for," he said. Something in his tone, a faint thread of humor, pulled a shaky half-smile out of her. He watched it appear, and his own expression softened for a moment. "Come on," he said. "Let's go home." Home. The word snagged her, catching on the fact that her apartment was no longer safe, that the life she'd built, with all its chipped plates and thin walls and grocery lists, had been blown apart. They didn't go back there. Nathan disappeared into whatever system Dominic's world used to deal with people who crossed lines. The Russians didn't vanish overnight. but the pressure around her eased. The strange cars stopped appearing near her block. The late-night shadows felt a little less sharp. Lily ran through Isabella's living room, chasing another child with bright plastic toys. Oblivious to the invisible war that had shifted somewhere above her head. Ava watched her from the couch, fingers wrapped around a mug of tea, and felt the tension in her spine slowly unknot for the first time in years. Dominic stood by the window, talking quietly into his phone. The skyline behind him, turning gold as the sun slid down. His tie was loose, top button undone, sleeves rolled up. It was the most undone she'd ever seen him. He ended the call and came over, leaning one shoulder against the doorway. "They're backing off," he said. "For now. At least. They lost their leverage when they lost him." "Nathan," she said. He nodded. She stared into her cup. "What happens to him?" "Nothing. You need to lose sleep over," Dominic said. She searched his face, then nodded slowly. Maybe she should be horrified. Maybe some part of her still was. But another part, the one that had watched her daughter cling to her in a strange apartment while men with guns checked the locks twice, felt something closer to grim relief. "So what now?" she asked. He was quiet for a long beat. Then he moved closer, far enough into the room that the lamp cast his face in warm light instead of cold window glow. "Now," he said, "you have a choice." Her heart tripped over itself. "A choice," she echoed. "You can leave," he said. "Take Lily. Disappear somewhere new. I can make that possible. New name. New city. Clean slate. I can make sure no one ever connects you to me. Or to this." She hadn't realized until that moment how much she wanted to hear those words. Freedom. Distance. A life where her daughter didn't know the word syndicate. "And if I don't leave?" she asked. His gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. "Then you stay," he said. "Here. With me. Under my protection. Not because you owe me anything, but because I can't stop wanting you here." The room seemed to shrink down to the space between them. She swallowed. "Dominic, I know," he said quietly. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight. I'm not asking for anything you're not willing to give. I just," he exhaled. Like the next sentence cost him more than most. "Every time you walk into a room," he said, "it feels less empty after you're there." She stared at him. At this man who commanded fear like other men commanded respect. Who could end lives with a nod, and yet looked almost uncertain now. Waiting for her reaction. She was exhausted. Relieved. Overwhelmed. Tempted in ways that scared her more than the men in the garage ever had. Because this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about what kind of life she wanted to build from the wreckage. "With you?" she said slowly. "Safe doesn't mean the same thing it does for other people." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." Lily's laughter pealed from the other room. High and bright. Ava glanced toward the sound. Then back at him. "I can't think about this tonight," she said. "Not properly. Not when my head feels like it's full of broken glass." He nodded. Something like approval flickering across his face. "Ask me again," she said softly. "When it's Keita. When I'm not so grateful." His mouth curved slightly. "Deal. Later." When the dishes were cleared and Isabella had taken her own children to bed, Ava found Lily asleep on the couch. Half sprawled. Half curled into herself. Sometime during the evening, the little girl had wandered over to Dominic and climbed onto his lap without asking. The way children do when they recognize something solid. Now she slept in his arms. Head tucked under his chin. One small hand fisted in the front of his shirt. He sat still, as if any movement might break the spell. his eyes on the sleeping child in a way that made his sharp features look softer. Ava stopped in the doorway and watched them. Heart doing something painful and unnameable in her chest. Dominic glanced up, sensing her presence. Their eyes met, and for a moment, all the noise of what he was and what she'd survived fell away. Maybe, she thought, safety was never really a place. Maybe it was a person. She didn't know yet if she was ready to trade one kind of danger for another. She didn't know if she could live in a world where the man holding her daughter like something precious also held a city by the throat. But as she stood there, watching him gently adjust Lily so her head rested more comfortably against his shoulder, she knew one thing with aching, terrifying clarity. For the first time, in a very long time, she didn't feel like she was standing at the edge of a cliff alone. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If Ava and Dominic's journey moved you, if it made you feel something, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves a good story. And tell me in the comments, what would you choose if you were in Ava's place? Would you take Lily and disappear? Or would you stay in Dominic's dangerous, protective world? Your comments, your likes, your shares, they help this channel grow. And they help me bring you even more stories like this. Thank you for being here.